Emily Elizabeth, and I'm the host of the What Fulfills You podcast, a show for and about individuals always seeking to be their best selves. On this show, we talk all about building the mindset, finding the right careers, creating meaningful relationships, and so much more. Welcome to the What Fulfills You podcast. Shirley, thank you so much for joining me today. I'm excited to get into your whole story. I read about a little bit on your background. You trained to be a professional ballerina, is that right?
I did. Feels like a very long time ago, but it was a huge part of my life.
Really?
Yeah.
Similar
From
to me.
10 years
okay.
old.
Yeah. I was a former competitive figure skater. So when I read
that. I've seen your amazing videos on your Instagram. Incredible.
Thank you. How do you think, because I always feel like for me, when I look back into how my athletic training parlayed over into what I do today, how has that discipline transitioned into what you do now and from like the initial career journey for you?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think about that quite a lot because, you know, as you experienced in your training, it's not only physically demanding, it's also mentally and emotionally very demanding. And it teaches you so much about discipline and pushing yourself and really, you know, being able to conquer so much at such a young age, especially, that I think sometimes when you're that young doing, whether it be dance or competitive, you know, skating, you actually don't really know what you're doing. Now that I look back, I'm like, wow, what I put myself through was incredible, what I accomplished. But I think what's really important from something like that is it did teach me a lot about myself. It also taught me a lot about discipline. I have no problem of committing, like putting myself into something and committing and going through the different stages and understanding that I have to like learn and practice and continue to like build on something. So I think that's definitely come from those dancing years, and I will be extremely disciplined in the work that I'm doing. So that's something I took from it. For sure.
Can you share the journey afterwards? So I'm sure that was like a big part of your childhood. How about like transitioning into, you know, whether you went to school or like, you know, in your 20s as you were developing into your career? What was that journey like?
Yeah, so that was an interesting transition. I mean, from 5 years old, I thought I was going to be a classical ballet dancer. I was so committed. I was so set. Dance was like my whole world. And then things that we don't need to go into, but like I had to make a shift. I had to change. And I remember my parents were really good with this because they were a bit like, okay, don't worry. You're going to make a shift. That's totally fine. You can change direction. And this is what this looks like. You go to university, get more academics, get more of your studying done, which was great, and just gave me a bit of a base. And then I was able to make this transition much easier because I felt like I had a bit of structure around me. But it was very much a case of being like, it's okay to change lanes. And that was something that took me a while to accept. You know, you're so set on something. And you think, especially when you're younger, you think that because you've said you were going to do that, that's what you've got to do. And so making those changes was hard, but accepting that it's okay to change direction, that it's okay to change and develop and become, you know, you're always growing. So, you know, I went off to university. I studied English and theater studies and film studies. And so I stayed in that creative world, which was great. And then I was able to just make that transition a little easier. And then from there, I went into marketing. And so that's, you know, that's quite a step from classical ballet to then into like more English, you know, major and theater and stuff to then going into marketing. Yeah, that's kind of three careers in themselves.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned as well that it's important to be able to accept that you need to shift and adopt into something new if if a certain chapter is kind of closing, right? Or clearly shows like this isn't going to work. What was like, you know, do you have any advice around that? Because that can be a big struggle for people, even when it's like simply from transitioning from college, university to going into a full-time job. And, you know, you could remember a little bit of what it was like in your early mid-20s of like, what am I doing with my life, right? Like that is a common question a lot of girls will message on Instagram to me about. They're like, you know, all these different things. It's like the dating life, the social life, the finances, the is this job fulfilling to me question, right? Like, how did you find that transition for you, and maybe some tips around what helped you evolve in that process?
I think, you know, that transition, especially from university going into the workforce. First thing is, do not worry if everyone else around you seems to have like got an internship or got a job, or they seem to have their path, like, you know, it's mapped out in front of them and they know what they're doing, and you don't know. That's completely okay. And I actually think it's sometimes better to not always know quite what you want, but to try a few things.
Yeah.
I do think it's important to get out there and test some things. So especially in, you know, during your years at university, if you have the opportunity to take some internships and stuff during the summer, do it. And try a bunch of different internships, because you're going to learn so much, not only about the potential industry that you're going into, but what that work environment looks like, and, you know, what those other people are like. That's going to just teach you so much, not only about that sector or that company, but it's going to teach you so much about yourself. And so that gives you a little bit of a head start before you get out of university. And then when you get out of university, take your time. You know, there's no rush. I think everyone's very quick to, you know, be like, I got to get a job and I got to get out there and I'm going to get set in my way and this is what I'm going to do. You don't need to do that. You can take your time. Apply for lots of different things. The one thing that I do think is really important, get out and go to as many interviews as possible. What you learn in an interview with somebody is so important. You learn how to, first of all, get over your own nerves. You learn what to say to other people. You learn how to engage. The more questions that you get asked, the more you're going to be able to understand what you want.
Right.
Those questions that people ask in interviews, what are you looking for in a job? Or where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Or what is it that you're expecting from the work environment? Those are going to plant little seeds that get you thinking. And by answering those questions, you're able to start to determine inside what you really want. So I do think getting out there and going to lots of interviews is key. Meet as many people as you can, and don't be afraid to ask for someone's advice or input, or for them to tell you about their experience. So people love giving advice, and they love talking about themselves and talking about what they've achieved, or, you know, and I just think the more you can absorb, the more you can hear and listen and experience, the better. You don't have to have it all figured out.
I want to dive into what I guess would be, correct me if I'm wrong, like the beginning of kind of your founder experience, which is with Wicker Woods Agency. Is that right?
Yes.
Did you have entrepreneurship experience prior, or like what was kind of the catalyst in getting started in this agency? And then of course we'll talk about how you transitioned into what you do now, but I think it's really fascinating that you started in this industry. And I think looking back to kind of from your story, it sounds like there are a lot of moving pieces that really do add up to how you were skilled in, you know, branding and so forth. But I would love to kind of hear from your end.
Yeah, so I mean, before I started an agency with a partner, I'd had a number of years in the industry working for various brands. So I'd always been in-house, always in the luxury and premium space. It didn't matter, though, whether I'd been with hotels and I had been with luxury brands. So I'd had a lot of experience within those departments and within those companies. And I had a desire to go out there and do my own thing. So I would go from being in-house, as we speak in marketing, to then being like support those clients and being much more a service and agency-led. This all came about at the same time that somebody I knew I had worked with in the industry before was also looking at doing the same thing. And I have to say, I do think partnerships I think they're great. They are challenging. Any partnership is challenging. But I do think if you're going into something, it is great to have a partner or a few partners that you can really work well with, and you've identified that you have different strengths. That's really important. Where you are strong, maybe they are weak, and where they are strong, you're weak. That's really important to identify. Communication within the partnership is really key. But that's not just a partnership in work.
Yeah.
That's a partnership in friendships and your romantic partnerships. Communication is the most important thing.
Yeah.
But I do think it's good to do it with a partner or partners. Being an entrepreneur can be quite lonely, and there is so much to do when you're building a company, whether that be a brand or an agency, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
There's a lot to do, and you have to wear a lot of hats, and that's not always the easiest.
Yeah.
You know, focus on what you love to do, because being an entrepreneur and starting a company or a brand or an agency or whatever it may be, about 80% of your job is doing a lot of stuff that you don't like. And there's only about 20%, which is doing what you really love or what you're really passionate about. Unless you can find the balance in that. And sometimes it's easier for certain entrepreneurs to be like, no, I'm just going to focus on what I love. And then I'll just hire the other people to do the stuff I don't. But especially with running an agency or a company, when you are at the top, you have to deal with the difficult stuff. You have to deal with things that aren't so easy, or maybe not what you want to do, or you don't want to have to focus on the accounts or the cash flow, or you don't have to don't want to deal with the lawyers or writing the contracts or stuff like that. It is very important that you know how to do it. It's essential. But sometimes you get pulled away from the stuff that you really love. So I went on and started an agency with a partner, and we ran that for a number of years, mostly based in the UK and Europe, working on luxury and premium brands. That taught me so much, not only about marketing brands and what goes into building a brand, mostly on the communication side and stuff, but we had the opportunity to do to work with other founders and entrepreneurs who were starting things up. So that really excited me, and I very much loved that element of my work, which then took me on to what I do today. When you run a company for that many years, you know, you also have life going on in the background, and things happen and things change. And, you know, where you were, you know, at the beginning, you know, 6, 7, 8 years on, you're a very different person. It's a journey, but it's definitely something I would recommend. But just be ready for some serious highs and some serious lows. But it's great.
What was the biggest takeaway you had from that company experience, whether it was having a partner or leading a team for the first time in that facet? Like, what did you take anything of that into what you do now as well, or just maybe general advice as well for entrepreneurs who are right now maybe experiencing, okay, I have to start to hire, or, you know, maybe the difficulties of having a partner, right? It is just like any relationship. It's communication, it's understanding how to not step on one another's toes, building trust, things like that. Any top tips you have from that experience that you could think of?
Yeah, a lot. A lot. So, well, first of all, communication is key. And as hard as those conversations might be, whether that's with your partner or with your senior team or with even, you know, the juniors, communication is key. And especially when you're running a team, sitting down with a team member who maybe is struggling and trying to understand where those struggles are coming from, or where there's been a change in attitude, or there's been a, you know, deliverables, timelines haven't been hit or something like that. Just sitting down being like, hey, what's going on? How can I help? I'm here, trying to be as open as possible. So that goes really down to communication and really listening to those people around you. I think the second thing that I definitely learned, I learned a lot about myself. And actually, I think this goes back to training as a dancer. I can be a perfectionist. I am very particular. And I expect not good, I expect excellent from myself. And often I could be way too demanding on myself and also too demanding on the people around me. You're as good as the last thing you did, the last piece of work you put out, the last press release, the last project you did. You're as good as that. So make sure that was the best thing you did. But I also learned that not everyone works at the same pace.
Right.
And not everyone gets to the goal in the same way. But all that matters is that the goal was achieved. Whether you went over the mountain, around the mountain, through the mountain, as long as you got to the other side. And everyone works in different ways.
Yeah.
Make sure you're surrounding yourself with people that do work in a similar manner, but that it's complementary. And everyone can work together. You're pushed by your teacher or your trainer or your coach. They want the best out of you.
Yeah.
It can be the same in the work environment, but it's sometimes got to be done in a little bit more of a sensitive way than I think how we were potentially shouted at in our training and stuff like that.
Was that ever something that you noticed also in relationships outside of the workforce, where you also, because you wanted the best for maybe it's like your partner or friends, that you had that kind of drive to want to, you know, tell them almost like in that coach-like way? And if you did you find ways to kind of navigate those conversations better that wasn't too overwhelming?
Yeah, I don't think I was. I think I was very predominantly in my workspace.
Okay.
And, you know, I definitely learned a lot over the years of managing that. There's a balance in the workplace of like when to handhold and then also when to be like, you got to get on with this.
Right.
Like a young girl emailed me wanting an internship. Took her on into an internship in one of the years between, like one of her summers between university. And she was great, really great, went back to university. To the point where I was like, why go back? Like, why don't you stay? You're so great. Anyway, she finished up university and she came back for another internship at the end of it. And we ended up offering her a job. And she, over the years, grew up to being, you know, an account manager.
Wow.
And she was so great. The way she just took everything on, and she was so diligent and dedicated and disciplined in what she was doing. And she worked so well. It was an absolute joy to work with this girl.
Yeah.
And it was just so wonderful reading her first internship letter, you know, please can I have an internship, you know, and where she then got to. And you know, there are times when mentoring someone or coaching them or, you know, just being the leader of a company and really giving them as much time and support as you can, when you handhold. And then there are other times where you have to be like back when we were being coached, kind of your coach is a bit like, you got to get on with this. You got to figure this out. Like I can't hold your hand the whole time.
Right. Tough love can be hard for some people.
It's really hard. It's really hard. And I used to be tough. Hiring is tough.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid to do a few interviews. Don't be afraid to ask a lot of questions when hiring someone. They should ask you questions too. Yeah. Ask as many questions as possible. Yeah. This is an interview for both people. And also, if somebody doesn't work out, it's got no reflection on either one of you. Yeah. It wasn't quite right. The right fit.
Right.
And it's better to let someone go, you know, if they decide to, it's not working out, you'll find the right person that fits.
Right.
What's worse is when people stay in a company and then an atmosphere or a toxic environment starts to be created. That's not good. Hiring and firing is no joy, but it is something as an entrepreneur that you have to get used to and know how to manage that correctly.
Yeah. I feel like it's such a strong parallel between like romantic relationships that we have, but we tend to take it less personal when it's in work than romantic relationships. Yeah.
When you're in a relationship and you sort of, I don't know, get turned down, or you hear it's not you, it's me. I mean, it's hard. It's really hard, but it's totally like, if somebody's going to stand there and say, look, it's not you, it's me, this isn't the right person for you anyway. Like it's better to know that this isn't right and to walk away, because the right person is out there. And it took me a really long time to understand that there's 7 billion people on this planet. There's going to be someone out there. Maybe there's more than one person, you know, but there's someone out there.
We'll definitely dive into romantic stuff for sure. But I do want to dive into first the drink. Right here, what we have on camera for those watching on video. We'll definitely try it. We'll sip on it while we talk about the story.
You've told me you're a mezcal fan,
I am.
I'm really pleased.
I am.
So this is Mezcal Campante, which is an artisanal mezcal, which I really recommend people drinking. Because artisanal mezcal is handmade, crafted. Can you get that one?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll be interested to know what you think, but you're a mezcal lover, so...
Ooh,
it's very
I like
smooth.
It is smooth.
Yeah, really
smooth. You know, it's funny because, you know, I always prefer mezcal over tequila, but I feel like there's, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I do think there's a huge trend around tequila. And I prefer vodka over tequila as well.
That's really interesting. So
I also like Harridan vodka.
before, you used to do tequila shots late at night. Like, it was horrible. It wouldn't even be like 100% Blue Weber agave, and it was like, oh, gross. And you'd have such a bad hangover the next day and be like, oh, why did I do those shots of really bad tequila? Thankfully, there is now wonderful tequila on the market, and they're incredible brands that have just opened up the agave spirit sector, which is really interesting. Mezcal was always one that a lot of people didn't find so easy.
Okay. Why
normally,
is that?
Because it's very smoky.
Okay.
A lot of people didn't like the smoke. And normally it's quite a high ABV. It's quite complex in its flavor profiles. So a lot of people would gravitate to tequila. And maybe once in a while have a mezcal margarita, or maybe if they're in Tulum, Oaxaca, try some. But it wasn't, and mixologists have always loved tequila mezcal, because of that beautiful smokiness.
Right.
So you would always see mezcal being used in great mixology places, and they'd always have a great cocktail and sometimes an interesting selection. But the consumer has definitely taken longer to adopt it. But I think now that tequila has paved the way for other agave spirits, and you're going to see some really interesting things come up. Yeah. But mezcal is definitely having its moment. My relationship with agave spirits started a very long time ago. I was always a tequila girl. Always drank tequila. It was my thing. My friends all thought I was absolutely crazy. They were all having vodka and gin and stuff like that. And I was like, nope, I'm tequila. One day you'll catch up with me. One day you'll realize that actually, if it's 100% agave, then it's really good. But mezcal, I appreciated. I thought the process with artisanal mezcal was one of the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. My mother is Mexican, was born there, grew up there, loves the country. I have lots of family and friends that live in Mexico, so I used to spend quite a bit of time there. Very cool. And so tequila and mezcal was always quite a central thing in life and culture and society and stuff. Yeah. I didn't drink mezcal. I would savor it. I was fascinated by the whole industry, and that's where my passion started. And then I started going on a very deep journey into mezcal. And this is where we are today, with a beautiful mezcal brand that has been a joy over the last 2 years to build. So it's great.
What is the meaning behind the name?
And also Campante.
The slogan. Give the whole spiel about it.
I will. Yeah. So Campante, it means to be happy, content, unconcerned, very happy, content with yourself, a deep peace.
I relate to that.
Yeah, which is nice, isn't it? It's really lovely. Yeah. It was also a word that sounds so beautiful, campante, to be campante. We gravitated towards that word because it also has, you describe someone, a human, as being campante. And I think that's lovely when a brand feels that there's a real human touch to it. Yeah. So that's where the name came from. Also, it's quite easy to say, Campante, which is great.
And your slogan, which is
Love hard,
sip slow. Where did that come from?
That came just as we were creating the brand. As you know, with brand development, you spend a lot of hours sitting and talking about the things that are, who your customer is. What are you trying to achieve? What is this brand its vision? What's its mission? What do you want people to feel or think or do when they engage in this in a brand? Mezcal really is at the center of so much of Mexican society and culture. Everywhere you go, when you go for lunch, when you go for a drink with a friend, when you go to a party, when you go to to the celebration of somebody's life, mezcal is always there.
Okay. So more so than tequila?
Yeah, okay. I would say so.
Okay, very cool.
But tequilas are very present, but mezcal really is really there.
Yeah.
And so from that loving hard, I also think that came from myself and also the other partners. We love hard. And one should love hard. What's that wonderful phrase of to not love at all is the greatest.
I read that before. It was I would rather love and basically get hurt than to not love at all. And I used to, because I'm very kind of type A, I used to be very hard-headed or stubborn with if this is not working, you cut it off type of thing. And it's I had a friend that kind of told me that quote, you have to let yourself kind of live and go through the ebbs and flows and allow yourself to love and be loved and kind of fall that, you know, what comes with that territory is also getting hurt as well. So
to love and be loved in return. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
But we're a fool if we think we're not going to get hurt. Like one of the most incredible things is when you love hard, you have to be fully open and vulnerable, and you may get hurt. Mm-hmm. But if you haven't even loved enough, you're never going to know. And I think, look, I was the same. I was very guarded. And the moment something didn't feel right, I'd be like, nope, I'm out. Yeah. Not for me. Not for me. And, you know, I remember times when friends were like, oh, but he's nice. Just date him for a bit. And I was like, no, if I don't see this going anywhere, I'm not going to. With my partner now, when we first started dating, I remember waking every single morning at the very beginning and thinking, if it ends today, I've been honest to myself, I've been totally true of this human, and I have loved as hard as I could. And that's okay. I kept waking up, and the relationship kept going, and it kept getting stronger and stronger. And, you know, we're five years on. So, but I just was so honest with who I was at the beginning. I'm going to be me. And if he doesn't like that, that's his problem. Yeah. And that was the first time in a relationship that I really took my walls came down, my shutters went up. I was very, very open, and I was willing to love as hard as I could and understand that I might get hurt. Sip slow, like take in this moment. There's no rush. I think, you know, after the last few years of what we've all gone through of a pandemic, and taking a moment to appreciate the friends and the family and the moment that you're in is really important.
Was that ever a struggle for you as, I don't know, I feel like we have similar personalities or frameworks in a way as businesswomen, and, you know, when you run a company, I think you have to think in a certain style, but was that ever a struggle for you to kind of pull back from thinking in the future too much?
Yeah, of
and
course.
Any advice around that?
Of course. You know, I say this to a lot of friends, and I've even had to do it. You know, when you get into a relationship, the first thing everyone says is like, oh, you're going to get married. And you're like, oh my God. People used to say this, and I'd be like, absolutely. Well, now because you've said that, no, please stop putting pressure on this relationship. Yeah. Whereas before, the wheels in my head would be going, and I'd be like, oh, well, might this person be the one I'm going to get married? You don't even need to think yet about that. Just appreciate right now. Stop jumping ahead to, like, you know, 5 years time. Just enjoy what you have right now. But it is important to think ahead. You have to balance that quite carefully. And the same is in business. Right. You need to look at what's going on right now and be present and take every day and really, but you also do need to make sure that you are thinking about what the next year and the 3-year and the 5-year plan for business is. Right. Now, it can change. Yes. I believe there is no right or wrong way of being in a relationship. Yeah. If you decide to get married or you don't decide to get married, that is completely up to the two of you. Yeah. What is important is the communication that came in between that of being like, what's important to your partner? Maybe that partner does want to get married. Well, what does that mean to you, and what does that mean to them? And understanding that, because the moment you start pulling each other in different directions is when it goes wrong. I saw in an article that you mentioned, when asked who you are most grateful for, you said your partner in life and business. And interestingly enough, when I read this too, this was at a time recently, obviously, but I realized this seems to be a consistent response, or like a common denominator, if you will, amongst a lot of successful people I have read or observed. Even like, I was a former tennis player as well, and when I would watch some of their interviews and who they're thanking, Roger Federer, for example, he recently, when he announced his retirement, I saw in that letter, he thanked his wife first. That's why when I saw you say that, I was like, this is so interesting to me. And I feel like I've had conversations with younger people as well where there's a struggle right now, or not just right now, but I think in general, when you're very ambitious or driven towards your own vision, your own dreams, you often get it mixed up as if you can't have both, or you can't have quality time with, a certain person or have a relationship. Today's dating culture is like, oh, I'm not looking for anything serious. Like I'm focused on this, whatever, right? And it's interesting to me because I feel like you actually, even from personal experience, you actually thrive more when you have a quality partner alongside with you, because you start to, it gives you a better and different energy in your own work. And I have felt that myself, but I'm curious to hear from your experience, because we talked about it earlier, that you once thought, hey, I gotta be laser focused. I can't have time for dating. And I definitely thought that myself before too. So I'm curious to know your thoughts. Yeah, I'm very, very thankful to my partner for many things, for teaching me a huge amount just about partnerships, about myself, about how to navigate things that he thinks in a very different way to me. And that has its challenges, but it also makes me see things in different ways. And that's what's really great about a partner, is making sure that you both are able to challenge each other, but then also open each other's eyes. Yeah. He's definitely pushed my boundaries, for sure. Before, I would work all the time. Yeah. I'd work on the weekends. I'd work all the time. And I would wake up at, my first emails would go out at 5:36, which is my team used to hate. So I had to always like pull back on that. And I would like set a thing, because I had no off switch. Right. And going into a partnership, I suddenly had a reason for having an off switch. And that was so wonderful. But I did struggle at the beginning, because I was like, hang on a minute. I'm meant to be working in these hours. Yeah. And instead I'm sitting here on the sofa watching Netflix with him, or I'm going off, or section your time. Communicate with your partner that I need to get some hours of work done this Saturday morning, but I'm going to work from, 10 until 12, and then let's go and have lunch together. Because not only is that good for you, also when you set time periods like that, and you have like a default diary where you're like, this is what I'm going to do in this section, and this is what I'm going to do, you work so much better.
That's true.
If you sit down at your desk and you've got 8 hours in front of you, you will do a little bit of this, and then you'll do that, and then you get distracted. And so setting time slots is really important, because then also you then have that dedicated time where you're like, we have lunch. We're going to go out for 2 hours. It's just going to be the two of us. And it will also stop you picking up your phone so much. Yeah. You'll be like, I've got 2 hours with him. I do, though, believe, and this has taken me a long time to understand, there are certain conversations that you and your partner can have about work. Right. And then there's other stuff that you should go and talk to somebody else about. Okay. Go and get advice from, it took me a long time to realize how important mentors and advisors are. It is okay to ask millions of questions. It is okay to not have the answers. Now, that was something I really took me a long time to learn. But it's okay to go to somebody and say, hey, I'd love to pick your brains on this for a moment. Can I get some expertise or some advice? And pull that from there, and then go back and talk to your partner about it. Having a partner that I could navigate life and work with, I think, is one of the greatest gifts I've ever been given.
Looking back, let's say there is a girl listening right now, or even a guy that thinks like, hey, I just can't allocate my energy to that, because then it'll take my focus away from my career, for example. What is your take on that now?
There is a period of time where you will just put your head down and work, and that is important. Yeah. If you're building something, you have to put in the hours. Yeah. Don't let those years go past you. Meeting people is one of the most enriching things that us as humans can do, is engaging and connecting and meeting other people. I remember a friend used to say, she was like, I go on every single date that I'm ever invited on. And I was like, gosh, that's exhausting. Like, how do you even have time? And she was like, no, because you never know who that person's going to be. You're going to have an experience, and hey, you may fall in love with the waiter or his brother. You never know. Like, the opportunity, there. Yeah. So any meeting or interview any interview you're ever offered, go to it. For the experience, for, what might come. But it's hard when you're so focused. And I know what that feeling is. And I know what that time period feels like. And you're just like, well, I have no time for anything else. Some things you can miss and you won't even think about. And that's fine. But there are going to be things that you miss. And you are going to, I don't want to say regret. Right. But you're going to have missed out. And you're going to remember that. Yeah. Just a few questions for the end of this. Okay, do you want to pick one from yours? Oh, yes, because we have ours as well. Yes, so we'll do like one or maybe two of each. First on your side. Okay. Would you rather be crazy rich or deeply in love? And why? That is tough. Yeah. Oh gosh, can't I be like deeply in love and crazy rich from all my hard work? As you get older, you start to think a lot more about the life that you're building and what's important. And, having a home and having a car and all of these kind of things are really important. But none of that means anything without love. I could not agree more. So if one of you is happy living in a $10 million house and the other one that doesn't matter to, that you need to figure out.
Right.
Because you're going to be striving for something that person, that doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Unless they're like, well, if that makes you happy, then I will come in on this, path and this dream of yours. Then you're communicating.
Yes.
Have you ever heard of the 5 languages of love?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm a firm believer that this is really important. Yes. And already that brings down some barriers of like understanding communication.
Yes.
What you speak with, what they speak with, what you give with can be very different, and understanding that's key. But you can have everything in the world, but if you don't have love, then what's the point? That's
ironically, that's exactly why I named this What Fulfills You, because I had that epiphany at a young age because of a breakup. But I realized at a young age that quality relationships is the foundation of what makes life fulfilling. Yeah.
And those quality relationships can be so many different things, and they should be. I think as I get older and as I see my parents getting older, I just want to spend so much more time with them and just have those moments of quality time together. Yeah. Okay, what are you going to pick from our cards?
What would you sing at karaoke night?
What would you sing at karaoke night?
Okay, I'd probably sing Love Story by Taylor Swift.
Nice.
Yeah, she's actually, fun fact, from my hometown.
Is she?
She is.
Okay, that's a great karaoke song.
Yeah, it's a classic. So
That is a classic. That's a good one. Okay. What traits do you want people to describe you as? Oh, that is this a person who likes me or somebody who doesn't?
I think it's maybe like, what would you want someone to describe you?
Yeah, over the course of my career, one thing that I have always heard was, you may have been tough, but you were always fair. I loved hanging out with my team and enjoying them, and I but I also know that my team don't want to hang out with me until 3 a.m. Right. So I would take them all out for drinks, and then I would exit, and they would all have fun and stay on. And I also always knew that if you blur those lines, and it is hard as a boss or an entrepreneur or the kind of a senior leader, it is hard. You don't want to blur those lines. Yeah. And you've got to manage that carefully. And you've got to go back into the office the next day and manage that team and things like that. But there's a balance there. And then, what was it? 3 things or traits. I don't think anyone would ever say that I'm not hardworking. Like if I put my mind to something and I take on anything, I will work till the end to make sure that project is successful and done well. However you do it, whether it's with somebody else who's helping guiding you or just in yourself, and you know that you're building and trying to advance, that fulfills me, and is knowing that I am building something, whether that be in business, in my relationship, or within myself. That fulfills me.
Ooh, I love that. I love that. Wow.
I was not going to say that. That's so interesting.
Oh, amazing. That's a great place to end this show. Well, thank you again for joining me. Where can everyone find Mezcal Campante, and share where they can find you, the social media, all of that good stuff?
Yeah, so, you can buy it online. We have a great e-commerce, a really great online store. A lot of alcohol brands didn't sell online. It wasn't something they did. And now, especially, from the pandemic and post-pandemic, people are much more willing to buy online, and especially a brand. Well, the one thing I can say is that we see this again and again. People really, they gravitate towards it, beautiful branding, but they don't know what the liquid tastes like. And, I can say that Campante is a really great mezcal that's very, very easy to drink. So get it home, enjoy it, drink with your friends. You'll really enjoy it. But yes, our e-commerce store, shop mezcalcampante.com, is perfect place. It arrives within about 2 to 3 days, depending on where you are. Very easy, comes in a beautiful package as well. We try to make sure that the whole experience is really well thought through. And then you can follow us on our website and our social media as well. So Mezcal Campante.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Emily. This was really great.
Awesome.
Thank you.